Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Could anxiety be causing your company to lag behind the competition? We'll find out today from our guest, Chester Elton, author of Anxiety at Work. Chester, thanks for being with us today.
Bill, always a pleasure to be on your show.
Chester, you know I love your books. I'm a fan. In fact, when I get them in the mail or when your agent tells me that you've written a new book, that's the one I open quickly. I take the pencil out, mark it all up, and get ready to talk to you. So, of course, we thank you for being with us today. Your new book starts out with a quote that I love. Beginning of chapter 1 says, "It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent. It's the one most adaptable to change." Can you talk? I think that's so perfect. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a quote I've loved for a long, long time now, because, I've got a little grandson and he loves dinosaurs. He's just all over dinosaurs. And in fact, he's got the encyclopedia, memory. He can give you all the species and genders and so on. Of course, these massive animals that went to extinction. And yet we've still got cockroaches. Those cockroaches, just you can't get rid of them because they're so adaptable. And never before has it been more important in business to be able to adapt. I mean, think of the curveball that the pandemic, gave the world, not just in business, in life in general. And there were organizations that thrived and there were organizations that went extinct. And the only difference was they saw an opportunity, they adapted, and they moved on. They didn't wait for things to come back to normal. They seized the reins, they made the adjustments, and they moved on. And that's the whole idea of agility in the workplace, of being able to make those changes. So yeah, I'm glad you cited that. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time.
And I think for all of us, if we should put that up someplace, because let's be honest, we all kind of fade back and say, wait, I like it the good old days, or it's not the way they did it back 3 years ago, 5 years, 30 years ago. And exactly right. It's not, because so much has changed. And of course, will continue to change, that we're facing. And if we're not aware of that from the beginning, we're going to kind of be rooted. And as I said to a friend recently, he hates change. He won't even have a cell phone, and he had to have an operation. I said, did you ask for a doctor who does it in the 1960s style? And of course he said no. I said, well, I remember it then. My father had the same operation. You're going to be in the hospital 2 weeks if you do it 1960 style, or today it's 3 hours. And of course he took the 3-hour option. But in his own life, he doesn't like to change. And by the way, I don't know what it is, but my grandson is crazy about dinosaurs. So maybe they're making a comeback. I think we should, instead of worrying about viruses and microscopes, maybe go out and look for that dinosaur that's around. Now, your book is about anxiety. And I want to be honest with you. When I heard that, I said, I love your books, but the word anxiety implies to me, I'm nervous. I've got a surprise quiz. I'm getting ready for the comprehensives, the bar exam, finals, nursing exam, whatever you want to call it. Can you explain what anxiety is in the workplace and in a medical explanation?
You bet. And it's very important, I think, to give it definition, because we all have a little different interpretation of anxiety. A lot of people equate stress and anxiety as the same thing, and they're not. Stress is, to your point, it's taking the bar exam. It's that deadline. It's that, that momentary pressure. We know that you can't live under extreme stress for very long, right? Your body just breaks down. Your mind breaks down. Anxiety, we define it as that persistent worry. And I think that's really the thing that I want your listeners to think about. It's not that thing that the Friday deadline that we, all gear up for and we power through and then we get to the weekend. It's that thing in the back of your brain that just gnaws at you all the time, that and anxiety, an anxiety disorder. The numbers in the book, and I'm sure we'll get to them soon. Let me preempt that a little bit, is that pre-pandemic, about 18% of workers said that they suffered from some kind of anxiety disorder. In other words, something that kept you from doing your job well. Right? In the middle of 2020, it was up to 30%. That's a huge jump. Now, as we broke down the data, as you look at employees in their early 20s, late 20s, it jumped up to 42%. So, Bill, this is that sort of silent thing that we don't talk about, that people aren't comfortable talking about, and yet is impacting all kinds of people in the workplace. And the fact is, they're afraid to talk about it because of that stigma. That somehow, if I admit that I'm anxious, that I've got some kind of disorder, people will think less of me. And that's the mission of the book, is to destigmatize and normalize that conversation.
Well, I want to tell you, I was that person. And when someone told me a few years ago, I said, why isn't so-and-so working? And they said, oh, he suffers from anxiety. And I looked like, what? Is that like a failure of, a bad hair day or sore feet? Don't we all have anxiety? We're nervous and you kind of grin and bear it, or you reach that level where you back off maybe. So I, to be honest, kind of poo-pooed it and didn't think it was too solid. Then I read your book and you really alerted me, but I also see new problems around it. And I just want to make known to our audience, the numbers you gave us, if I'm correct, I think you said 42%. That's basically 2 out of every 5 workers.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. Now, I want to point out something really fun that we did with this book. This is our 14th book that Adrian Gostick and I have written together. And we've always been Gostick and Elton, Lennon and McCartney. That was the brand, right? Except for this book, you'll notice on the cover, it's Gostick and Elton and Gostick. So Anthony Gostick, Adrian's son, who's a millennial, really super bright kid. I mean, I've known Tony literally most of his life. Super smart kid. He's working in genetics. He's going to get his master's at USC. And, he takes courses that not only can we pronounce, we have no shot at spelling, And it's so interesting. He gave us that perspective. He said, you oldies, which we appreciated. He said, you oldies, you never talk about this stuff. To your point, our generation, it was like, rub some dirt on it. Suck it up, buttercup, get back in the game. If we were playing football and got knocked out, everybody laughed. They gave you smelling salts and sent you back in, right? It was laughable. Well, he says, you got to understand, my generation, mental health is all we talk about, because we don't think you can solve a problem unless you talk about it. So let's bring it out into the open. Let's have the conversation. And that's that generational divide that we're hoping this book will really help give managers of a different generation the tools to understand what's going on in these wonderfully engaged, smart, and anxious employees that we're all bringing into the workplace.
I have to tell you, when you started talking about the extra name on the title, on the authors, and you said it's always been Gostick and Elton, I thought you were going to tell me that you said, wait a minute, I think it's time for my name to be first. It's not Abbott and Costello, it's Costello and Abbott. And I thought you were going to, this is our last collaboration. We're going our separate ways. We're breaking up, etc. And then I looked at the book, the physical copy of the book that I have here before me. But what you're saying leads me into exactly my next question. I was going to ask you, is it more prevalent now, the older worker, and older today can be anywhere 45, 48, 52, the older worker who says, if I lose the job with the company I'm with, I'm probably not going to catch on at that rate with someone else till they know how good I am, or I'm going to have to prove myself? Or is it the millennials who, to us, they seem so relaxed, like, oh, it's my birthday, let's take a month off. Or, okay, if you fire me, I'll just go down the block and get another job. Now, you've obviously done this, and I think you've worked with, I saw the number, 1 million people between you and Adrian and Anthony, researching this and going through it. So which group is really, I guess, the most concerned, most into it, and most afraid of it, I guess is the word?
Well, you bring up a great point. We talk in the book about the duck syndrome. And this was a phrase that was coined at Stanford University. And to your point, you think about the ducks or the swans on the pond, and they're just gliding along. You think, oh, they don't have a care in the world. Look at how efficient they are and how calm they are. And of course, underneath the water, they're paddling like mad, right? And so they came up with this phrase. And even Anthony said, yeah, we call each other ducks. It's this, Facebook life that you present to the world, that little box on Zoom that you're so confident and coiffed and wonderful, when in the back of your mind, you've got that persistent worry. Here's another number that comes out, and yes, it is very much a generational thing, is at least in expressing it, is 75%, and that was a staggering number for us. 75% of millennials and Gen Z said that they had recently left a job because of mental wellness, mental well-being. So think about that. So you say, okay, they're so relaxed. They know they can get another job. They quit. The reason they quit, Bill, is because the stigma attached to mental health is still so strong that when they get overwhelmed and when they get anxious, rather than talk about it, they just quit. Because here's the last little data point I'll give you is only 1 in 10 workers in America today is comfortable talking to their immediate supervisor about mental health. 1 in 10. So you say, look, I'm a younger worker. 4 out of 10, right, are anxious at work, some kind of anxiety disorder, and yet only 1 in 10 will talk about it. So in the book, we talk about, so what's the solution? Because everybody agrees, look, if it's not our number one issue, it's 1A. What do we do? Well, we've got an EAP line. Here's an 800 number. Take a little time off, forced, PTO. Download the Calm app on your phone, which, by the way, I have, and it's great. It's not the solution, right? We don't know what to do about it. So we say, look, start here. You've got to normalize the conversation. If you had taken a vacation to Aspen and broke your leg skiing, we'd say, obviously take some time off. Somehow when somebody says, I'm just overwhelmed, I need a mental health day, we go, huh? And we don't want to talk about it as employees because we're afraid that then we're labeled, can't hack it, won't get that plum assignment, will certainly not get the next promotion. So we're really good at hiding it until we can't hide it anymore. And then instead of talking about it, we quit. So you've got to normalize the conversation, destigmatize it. The normalization is, look, it's a health issue. The destigmatize is, it's a health issue. Don't worry about being labeled. And then the third part, which is so critical, is you've got to empathize. It's so interesting. We're in all these leadership groups, as you might guess, right? And we talk to these great leaders and say, even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, if you asked what was the must-have characteristic of great leaders, they'd say, oh, great communicator, inspires the future, transparent, and so on. Said, now, you know what? There's only one, and it's this, empathy. If you don't have empathy after all we've been through with the pandemic, with all the generational divides and the diversity and inclusion and all that stuff that's going on, if you can't empathize, you have no shot of becoming a great leader and attracting and retaining great employees. Now, that was a long answer to a short question. I hope it made sense.
It did, and I have 15 more questions from that. But Chester, right now I want our audience to know that if they're just tuning in, they're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Chester Elton. He's the author of the book, Anxiety at Work. And Chester, will ask you, 1, where we can get the book, and 2, if there's a website where we can just learn more about this.
You bet. It's available at fine bookstores everywhere, Amazon, anywhere you get fine books. We love Book Pal. They give a great rate if you're looking for bulk orders and so on. Chester at chesterelton.com is my email address, but chesterelton.com is our website, and Gostigan Elton is our website as well. So the other thing I would say, sorry, Bill, is follow us on LinkedIn. We put all kinds of great stuff on LinkedIn, all kinds of great articles and research, and would love to have you join us there.
Our audience probably knows and says, wait, that name Chester Elton is familiar. We've had Chester on before, and one reason why, he writes really interesting books. And if I'm going to read the book and ask questions, I like his books. It's like a good mystery writer. But honestly, this is one I picked up and started looking at, and I forgot what it was. I was supposed to do something else. I think pick up my wife someplace, and I'm sitting there marking it up, and she's going, are you coming? Are you coming? And I'm going, this is really interesting. So I'm not just hyping it up, but for a business person to be aware of what's going on in society, if they're getting on a plane, if they have a time, even a beach read or a vacation read, this is very interesting. It tells us what's going on. And maybe it's just the reason why we're starting to lag behind as a company, or we're not doing as well as the competition. It can't hurt to know about this stuff and see what's going on. Now, to your point that you brought out, are these people quitters? When I was growing up, quitter, you walked away from something, quitter, loser, etc. If I go to the boss and say, I'm suffering from anxiety, is he or she going to give me that sideways look? Yeah, take a day off, and I'm going to move up, Al, to your position, or Shirley, because you might not be too solid.
Right. Here's the thing that's really interesting, Bill, and I want you to do a little reflection here. And those of you that are listening, in our circle of friends and work associates, we all know somebody who's just off the chart smart, right? Just brilliant. Now I want you to ask yourself, are they a little quirky? Are they a little anxious? Are they a little out of the normal? And the answer is every time.
Yes. My head is going up and down.
Yeah. So it's so interesting. We say, well, are they quitters and blah, blah, blah. You say, you know what? I've never met anybody that wasn't extraordinary, that didn't suffer from anxiety. So yeah, let's just deal with it as if it were a sprained ankle, a broken leg. Let's accommodate that and move on, because we need those brilliant people. And we make certain accommodations, just like if you were in a car accident, we would make an accommodation. And I have to tell you, Adrian and I were just in Houston yesterday doing a workshop with a wonderful group of leaders, an emerging restaurant chain called BB's Tex Orleans. Great gumbo, by the way. If you're in Houston, go to BB's. And it's so interesting as we start to talk to their senior leadership. Do you know what came out? Every one of them said, this is one of my top issues. We employ a lot of young people, as servers. We've got people that are, employees that do it part-time until they go back to university and so on. And then it got really interesting, because as we got deeper, as we went into the training and we went into the, talking about what are the strategies to help alleviate this. It started with, yes, my people suffer from this. We've got to address it too. And me too.
Very interesting.
It's so interesting, Bill. As you start to reflect, you go, you know what? There were times in my career where I was completely overwhelmed. And here's what happens. And this is why the empathy piece, normalize, destigmatize, and empathize, is that when you get overwhelmed, when all that uncertainty piles up on you, the worst thing that can happen is you feel all alone. And that's exactly what happens, because you don't feel safe talking to anybody. So one of the things we talk to leaders about is you don't go into somebody and say, hey, Bill, I've noticed some things just don't seem to quite right. Are you suffering from anxiety? That doesn't work. It's, hey, I've noticed that things have just kind of changed. I've been in a tough spot before as well. And for all we've been through and all the changes, believe me, I can relate. If there's anything you want to talk about, if there's anything I can do to help, please know that I'm here for you. You are not alone. It's one of the most powerful messages that leaders can send to their people, because as soon as you make it not just psychologically safe, you make it emotionally safe to talk about your anxiety, good things happen all over the place. People are more transparent. They're more trusting. You can get in there. You can help them out. And then, boy, are they appreciative of that? Are they going to work harder? Are they more committed to the cause? And of course they are. Of course they are. And your odds of losing these really bright and good people go way down. It's fascinating to me, Bill, that the conversation always starts, yes, my people are having that issue. And the more we talk about it, and they go, yeah, and me too.
I just wrote that down while you were talking, because I think that's the title of your next book. And me too. I know it seriously would be great, because one of the questions I was going to ask you was that, let's say I'm the boss, since I'm the older person and most people are younger. You're talking, giving the talk, and I come up to you and I say, Chester, everything you say makes sense, except the people over me say, if we don't hit this goal this month, they may consider selling or moving to Texas or changing the workplace of the company. And to be honest, I'm scared, because I don't want to move to Texas. I don't want to work for a foreign company. And I'm trying to protect myself and all my workers, and me too. And I'll get that in there. The boss isn't he or she conflicted that on one side, success is selling, 3,000 of these products every year, insurance policies, whatever it is. But on the other, it's the mental health of the people.
Well, let me flip that around on you. What are your odds of hitting the goal if nobody shows up?
I knew you'd do that to me. You outsmart me every time. And no, you're absolutely right. Of course, that's right. And as I said, your book really is a wake-up call and brings this to the forefront. But that was one of the things I wrote down, because I said the poor manager can be the greatest person in the world wanting to do this. And yet now, on top of everything else, business school, get your MBA, know the latest trends in business. And oh, by the way, be a little bit of Dr. Phil, 20% psychiatrist, psychologist, and know what to do. And that's another thing. Is there even a scorecard for this? In golf, when you hit par, bogey, double bogey, or you really, like me, triple, quadruple bogey, or you don't even put down the score. Is there even a scorecard we can use for this? Like if a manager is looking at his company, how he or she would know that these people need you to come in and talk or should read this book?
Sure. Let me break that down. The answer is yes and yes.
Okay.
So here's what's really interesting. We get this pushback from managers all the time. They say, look, I've got crushing quotas. I've got people breathing down my neck. I've got customers demanding. And now you're asking me to be a psychologist as well. We're not. And this is a really important message of the book. And it comes to with this empathy piece. You know, it is so interesting. We have a podcast called Anxiety at Work, available, you know, wherever you get your podcasts. And we were interviewing Chris Rainey, a dear friend of ours. He's actually in the book, runs a virtual conference company out of London that, you know, was in person, now coming back to in person, suffered from anxiety his whole life. You'd never guess it. Brilliant in hiding it. And he said, you know, it's really interesting. When your people finally, you know, muster up the courage to talk to you about it, they don't expect you to have all the answers. They expect you to do one thing, and we can all do this. They expect you to listen. Just listen. You don't have to have all the answers. The message is, I'm here. I'll listen. We'll work through this together. You're not alone. That's the first part. I'm safe. The second part is, and I can't believe you brought it up on a scorecard, is we're working with a wonderful company because, you know, how do we score anxiety? You know, is it the number of calls to the EAP line? Is it, you know, is it turnover? What is it? There's a wonderful company called the Culture Think Tank, and we're just releasing it next week. And it is a dashboard and a platform that anonymously surveys your employees and gives you a scorecard on anxiety. And the roadmap is our book, line by line. Is it overload? Is it perfectionism? Is it uncertainty? With very specific characteristics that you as a leader can work on that are measurable. Because that's the big unknown, right? I think I'm doing it right. How do I know I'm doing it right? What's my scorecard? You know, is it an eagle? Is it birdie? Is it par? Or is it a double bogey? Right?
Like me. And
exactly.
I think this is great for bosses and to prep them, obviously, reading your book, because we all feel we're not competent for that, or most of us probably aren't psychiatrists, psychologists. But if there is some way we can be alerted to it, A, by your book and then by this scorecard, that would be fantastic. Chester, before we go further, I'd like to let our audience once again know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Our guest today is Chester Elton, E-L-T-O-N. His book is Anxiety at Work. And we're going to ask Chester again, tell us, where can we get the book and the website where we can learn more about this?
Yeah, the book is available at fine bookstores everywhere, wherever you get your books. Harper Business is our publisher. They're wonderful. Follow me on LinkedIn. We've got some great resources for you there. And our websites are really simple, gostickandelton.com and chesterelton.com.
And Chester, as you said, if you're not hitting your goals, if you're wondering what's holding you back, it may be this topic. And it's the kind of thing that could be happening. It's almost like small mosquitoes around the company. You're not going to see them. And yet they're interfering with the process of getting you to where you want to go. The workers are suffering. And I imagine once this gets addressed, it's like literally a breath of fresh air. Everybody feels more positive. They're all moving in the same direction, and goals are achieved, and companies are doing a lot better.
Well, yeah, you know, it's so interesting. You talk about, you know, when you get there, it's just a breath of fresh air. Everybody can relax. Everybody can breathe. You know, everybody can move forward. It's so interesting. You say this may be one reason you're not moving forward. I guarantee you it's one of the reasons if you're not moving forward, because it is so prevalent. It was so interesting.
I'm sorry.
Well, it was just so interesting. As Adrian and I have done more interviews, we've done more keynote speeches, and we're doing more and more workshops, how prevalent it really is and how incumbent it is on us as leaders to make sure that we are addressing it. And, you know, it's so interesting. You know, the last book you interviewed me for was Leading with Gratitude. And people said, how do you go from gratitude to anxiety? You know, that's a whiplash moment, you know. And it's so interesting because we talk about 8 strategies in dealing with anxiety. The 8th strategy is using gratitude to interrupt the anxiety. You know, it's so interesting. And you know this, you know, you and I have been around long enough. The human brain is not wired to make you happy. It's wired to keep you safe. So we're always looking for danger. There's always that, you know, that persistent worry. And one of the things that it really is a great way to interrupt that and calm things down is you interrupt it with gratitude. Bill, I want you to know I never take you for granted. I saw what you did with that customer. That was a tough situation. You explained it. You walked him through it. I'm telling you, I don't tell you often enough. I never take you for granted. That interruption allows your brain to shift from danger to safe to happy. It's wonderful.
And I was just thinking as you're talking, your philosophy about gratitude, I think we've had you on more than any other guests in the 33 years we've been on the show. So it kind of shows if you want to get on the secrets of success, just be grateful and express it to people. Jesse, you mentioned in your book a process of continuous review for people and the relationship between the boss and the worker and who knows what they're doing, etc. Can you address that a little bit and how that helps reduce anxiety?
Oh, you bet. You know, the biggest cause of anxiety in the workplace is uncertainty. I don't know. I don't know where we're going as a company. I don't know if we're going to survive as a company, and I don't know my role in the company. So we really encourage organizations, not just the leaders, organizations. If you think you're over communicating, you're probably doing it about right. Fill in the gaps. It's so interesting. I was just talking to a friend of mine earlier this morning about uncertainty. We're traveling more now. It's safe to travel. And I was in Kansas and Utah last week. I was in Houston last night. And I'll tell you, the airlines have not gotten better, by the way. And the one thing that they're failing at is just letting you know what's going on. And we've all had this experience. You push back from the gate 15 minutes late. Nobody tells you why. Right. And then you pull out onto the tarmac and then you stop for another 15 minutes. And then maybe if you're lucky, the pilot comes in and says, by the way, just a quick heads up. They've closed a runway. There's a lot of traffic. We've got international flights in front of us. We're fifth in line. We're probably going to take off in about 10 minutes. All of a sudden, everybody goes, oh. And then they'll say, by the way, when we get in the air, we can probably make up that 20 minutes. So if you've got a connection, don't worry. Everybody calms down because we're all, if you're not on a direct flight, the immediate thing you're saying, hey, when are we going to get in the air? I've only got an hour between flights. If we're half an hour late, I may not make the connection. I'm not going to get to the wedding. So you can understand the story, right? If the pilots would just get on and say, hey, sorry, we pushed off 15 minutes late. Hey, we're in line. Hey, and kept you. Same thing in the workplace. Hey, this is where we are. This is how we want to get there. This is how we're going to get there. This is your role. And checking in with regular updates, boy, it calms everybody down. And I hope that example made sense.
You're a mind reader because I don't mind when I get a phone call when it says, there's a backlog. Your call is very important to us. But so long as they tell me there's a 2-minute wait or a 5-minute, then I know, do I want to wait or not? When they say your call is important and 20 minutes later, I'm still hanging on and I'm going, important? You think I'm important? You're going to know how important everything hits the fan. I love this. We should have booked this for a 3-part show because we've had so much fun and it's a pleasure talking to you. Once again, I want our audience to know the book is Anxiety at Work. It's by our guest, Chester Elton, E-L-T-O-N. Chester, once again, give us the website.
You bet. It's GostiganElton.com. It's ChesterElton.com. And be sure to follow us on LinkedIn.
And the next book when you come out with, and me too, I want you to let us know. We want to be the first ones to interview you. Promise?
Absolutely, Bill.
Come on, I have your word.
Yeah, there you go. I promise.
I'd like our audience to know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.